Hello, AP Macro. Today we're going to talk about topic 1.3, which is comparative advantage and gains from trade. When it comes to specialization in trade, why do people trade? Well, if we assume that people didn't trade, what things would you have to go without? Anything that you don't make yourself. The point is, everyone specializes in the production of goods and services and therefore trades with others. What would life be like in cities if we couldn't trade with people in other cities, or in states where we couldn't trade with people in other states? It would limit the amount of choices and make people worse off. More access to trade means a higher standard of living. So, two terms that we're going to learn about today are absolute and comparative advantage. Let's assume it costs you $50 to produce 5 shirts. What is your per unit cost for each shirt? The answer is $10 per shirt. Therefore, we have our formula. Your per unit opportunity cost is your opportunity cost over your units gained. Now, if we take money out of the equation, instead of producing 5 shirts, you could have made 10 hats. What is your per unit opportunity cost for each shirt in terms of hats given up? One shirt costs 2 hats. Well, what is your per unit opportunity cost for each hat in terms of shirts given up? One hat costs 1/2 of a shirt. So if we take the example of Ronald McDonald and Papa John, let's say Ronald McDonald can produce 20 pizzas or 200 burgers, and Papa John can produce 100 pizzas or 200 burgers. Well, what is Ronald's opportunity cost for one pizza in terms of burgers given up? One pizza costs 10 burgers. And what is his opportunity cost for one burger in terms of pizza given up? One burger costs 1/10 of a pizza. How about Papa John? For one pizza, in terms of burgers given up, one pizza costs 2 burgers, 100 to 200 is the ratio. And what is Papa John's opportunity cost for one burger in terms of pizza given up? And the answer is one burger costs 1/2 pizza. Therefore, Ronald has what's called a comparative advantage when it comes to producing burgers, whereas Papa John has a comparative advantage in the production of pizza. Therefore, they should specialize. Absolute advantage is when a producer can produce the most output or requires the least amount of inputs. Papa John has the absolute advantage when it comes to pizzas. He can make 100, Ronald can only make 20. Comparative advantage, however, looks at the lowest opportunity cost. Ronald has the comparative advantage when it comes to burgers because he has a lower per unit opportunity cost. Therefore, countries should trade if they have a relatively lower opportunity cost. They should specialize in the good that is cheaper, the one that they have a comparative advantage in. Let's look at an example between the USA and Brazil in the trade of wheat and sugar. S stands for sugar, W stands for wheat in the graphs that you're looking at. If the US specializes and makes only wheat, and Brazil makes only sugar, then they're going to trade one wheat for 1.5 sugars. Trade is something that shifts the PPC. You'll notice the curve goes outward after trade takes place. The easiest way to do this is to draw a chart. For instance, wheat, when it comes to United States production, can make 30, where Brazil can only make 10. Sugar, the US can produce 30, whereas Brazil can produce 20. When you put it in chart form, one wheat costs one sugar for the US, and one sugar costs one wheat for the US. But for Brazil, one wheat costs 2 sugars, and one sugar costs 1/2 of a wheat. Which country has a comparative advantage in wheat? The answer is the US, because they can make one wheat for one sugar. whereas Brazil needs one wheat to make two sugars. When it comes to the production of sugar, Brazil can make one sugar costing them only one half of a wheat, but the US, one sugar will cost an entire wheat. So the best way to do this when you have your examples is to make this chart. As soon as you make this chart, and you can examine it and look at what the comparative advantage is and who has it. In this case, which country should export sugar? Which country should import wheat? Which country should import wheat? Sorry, I said export wheat and then import wheat. So here's how you determine comparative advantage. This is what's called the output method. An output question asks, the following chart illustrates the number of CDs, number meaning output, and the pounds of beef that can be produced in 1 hour. An output question, the other goes over. O. The other term goes over. And here are some questions that go along with it. The input method has to do with resources or time. In this case, the chart is asking for the number of hours or a variable that it takes to produce one loaf of bread. In this case, the input, the other goes under. I know it's hard to take a look at the beginning, but give it a try. This brings us to the concept of terms of trade. Both countries can benefit from trade if they each have relatively lower opportunity costs. Your terms of trade are the conditions that you agree upon that would benefit both countries. Example, if you trade 1 ton of wheat for 1.5 tons of sugar, that would benefit both countries. So let's take a look at another example of pineapples and radios between Kenya and India. Remember, the products don't really matter, and when we use these, we use round numbers. So what you should do right now is make a chart based on these concepts. Who has an absolute advantage when it comes to radios? What is the cost of one radio for India? What is the per unit opportunity cost of one pineapple for Kenya? Who has a comparative advantage in pineapples? Who has a comparative advantage in radios? Who should import pineapples? And trading one radio for how many pineapples would benefit both countries? Let's take a look at the answers. First thing you want to do is go ahead and make your chart. You'll notice when you do this, you can look at who has a comparative advantage. Kenya wants radios. In terms of trade, for one radio is greater than 3 pineapples, and Kenya is worse off and should just go ahead and make radios on their own. India wants pineapples. If the terms of trade for one radio is less than 1 pineapple, then India is worse off and should make pineapples on their own. What terms of trade benefit both countries? Trading one radio for 2 pineapples will benefit both. If Kenya produces radios by themselves, they have to give up 3 pineapples for each radio. But if they can trade 2 pineapples for each radio, they are better off. If India produces pineapples by themselves, they have to give up 1 pineapple for 1 radio. But if they can get 2 pineapples from a radio, they are better off. The countries trade at a lower opportunity cost, and they both than if they made the product themselves. Here are some practice questions that you can take a look at to understand these concepts. Also, at the end of the video, there'll be some videos to help you further understand the concepts.